because even UN, these NGOs,
yes,
when they initiate projects, they're looking up to best practice project management. And especially ladies, women, this is the era of women. So if we have women who are qualified, you just be declining some offers coming your way, which is good. Which is
right. No, but it's really worth it. It is worth it. If you think of it, I think I don't know, but that's what I feel. I mean, I think it's even actually cheap when it comes to cost. And that's why I was, when I saw this email coming in and I saw the cost, I said I cannot miss this one.
Yes, because
I couldn't. The discounted one, it's just amazing.
Even me, when people tell me no, but it's a bit expensive, I say, look, treat it as an investment, because the money you invest in education, they will recoup. It will come back, repay. It's like a business case.
Yeah.
You have investment and benefits. Believe me, you put CAPM after your name on your business card, you get noticed.
Yeah. I think looking at the cost that we paid for this course, and I mean it's equal to
It's a
the money
bargain.
that
It's a
I get to
bargain.
supervise. It's equal to the money that I get to supervise a student on an honors level.
Yes.
So it's really nothing.
Exactly.
For this kind of knowledge.
And you are investing in knowledge, which means that knowledge does not expire.
Right, it doesn't.
Mr. Mali, are you speaking to us?
Yes, Doc, I was saying knowledge doesn't expire. We would definitely use it wherever we are.
Very well. Okay. I'm glad to hear that you still you're keeping up the momentum. And yes, PMI, CAPM, PMP, these are American products. But if you look at the PM book, it's about 900 plus pages, like hundreds, thousands of experience, best practice. Okay, let's look at this afternoon. We want to do procurement and stakeholder engagement. And then we should be done with the theory. And then after 1 week, we'll meet again and look at the practice questions. The more we do them, and the better. But we need the theory in order to do the practice. And just like as much, we'll start. Let me just check if I'm recording this, because Tinashe asked me to record it. I just want to check if the recording is on. Okay. Yeah, it's recording here. So we can have these sessions sometimes when you want to just to reflect. I'll put in the same folder. So what you need is just to go to the same video Dropbox folder and refresh it. You'll see more videos, recordings. Procurement. It's a nice one, but very sensitive. Very sensitive kind of knowledge area. The reason I say very sensitive is because that procurement, you actually find supply chain specialists Sometimes you find company buyers. They would say you cannot buy for the company because you are not a buyer. Now, if you're a project manager, how do you deal with procurement? And this is the purpose of this discussion, because procurement is very key. It's not that you just procure equipment, you can procure experts also. If I'm a consultant, I will be procured in terms of the procurement process can involve daily rates, per diem, accommodation, flights, all that goes through procurement. And as a project manager, you ask yourself, can we deliver this solution as a team? If the answer is no, then we need procurement. And the fact that you are working for the organization, then that organization has got a procurement department. And they've got procurement officers and head of procurement. Then you must strategize as a project manager because you need your own procurement plan. And this is why we include this discussion. It's got only 3 processes. It's a small knowledge area, right? Compared to risk. Risk had 6 processes. This one has got only how many processes? 3. You just plan the procurement management, you conduct procurements, and you control procurements. The previous PMBOK had another process which we called close procurement. This has been removed because as a project manager, you can conduct, monitor procurements, but you can't close procurements because this must be closed by procurement office, head of procurement. So that they removed that process, closed procurement. You see, because if you ask a procurement officer, they will tell you that when they do procurement, they award contract, then they monitor execution of that contract up to closure. Okay? But as a project manager, you need also procurement because there are some services, products, and goods which you need from external suppliers. So from the project management point of view, you can do plan procurement, but the advice I always give to project managers, when you plan procurement, involve the head of procurement. Head of procurement. Because what happens in real life is that project managers, they blame procurement department that they delay their projects. And procurement officers blame project managers that they walk in our office that they need savers, they need this next week. You can't get it. Because procurement, they have got their own policies, they've got their own standards, and they've got their own guidelines. Procurement may say, let's tender this because they need to offer it competitively. They need suppliers to compete, and that brings the price down. So it's not legal for project manager to select suppliers and award contract. It's not legal. It's not best practice. You would ask me then, what is the normal procedure? The normal procedure is project manager must work with procurement. Your project procurement plan must be submitted to procurement to include it in what we call the master procurement plan for the whole organization. You get the master procurement plan. Okay? So you cannot blame procurement that procurement are delaying you. If you say procurement is delaying you, it means that you did not involve them on inception. When you are doing the planning, that's the right time to involve procurement. Definitions. Project procurement management. This includes the processes necessary to purchase, acquire products, services, or results needed from outside the project team. Some agreements, documents, or communication that defines the initial intentions of the project. This can take the form of a contract, MOU, letters of agreement. They sometimes called the letter of intent, verbal agreements, email, and so forth. And you may have contracts. Most of the projects which you can work on are contracted work, tender work. From you win a tender, you get an award letter, and you do an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. And normally the contract is binding, mutually binding, obliging the seller to provide the specific product or service or result, and obliges the buyer to pay for it. Normally payment from buyers is through milestones. It could be a project worth 2 million, but then the payment would be after delivering the milestone, like in 4 installments. So the plan procurement management, that's the process of documenting project decisions, specifying the approach, and identifying potential sellers. Because normally, like in industry, as a project manager, you've got quotations from suppliers. You must hand over the quotations to the head of procurement. And if you proceed to go ahead, then you are not being ethical. I know this is a controversial statement because I've seen, from my experience, I've seen project managers asking suppliers for quotations, doing contract management. But look, every organization which is decent, it's got a supply chain department and head of supply chain. And I don't think project manager is capable of doing supply chain logistics. That's outside the jurisdiction of a project manager's role. Please feel free to express your opinion on that, because in my experience and what theory says is that the project manager with the project considers the head of procurement as a key stakeholder. So project manager must engage the head of procurement. Head of procurement must engage PM in order to come up with a procurement plan for the project. the maintenance of supplier database is incumbent on the head of procurement. Due diligence is done by... Yes, please.
On the issue of procurement, how do we go around the policy? I find that for even like the really organized organizations, the people, you wonder how the people who won the tenders actually won the tenders. So you find that procurement is a very big part of projects because immediately you get the wrong material, immediately you get the wrong product. Even if you carry out your like the project properly, it's still going to fail because where the source of the goods that you're getting is not legit. And I've noticed it like in several projects, like everything will be fine, you let procurement do it, but then they get sometimes maybe it's the cheapest person, but then they give you someone who even it's not practical. So then what do you do in that case as a project manager?
Very good question, I must say. And what happens is, as a PM, you are this side, okay? You are in a business unit. You are a project manager. You have components of the project which you need procured, okay? You send a request to your head of procurement. You engage, the head of procurement must be notified that you are in the planning phase, and invite head of procurement, because head of procurement has got a supplier database, because suppliers must be registered in order to do business with your company. The ones who maintain that supplier database, they are procurement department, not project manager. However, project manager may have an inquiry and may have solicited some suppliers who may supply goods and materials and services which the PM considered of superior quality. PM can recommend to head of procurement that our recommended suppliers are this. Then head of procurement, they do what we call due diligence, because the suppliers must be compliant with tax. The suppliers must be in good standing with the law, because head of supply chain, they keep blacklisted suppliers. They could be suppliers which PM wants, but they may be blacklisted because of the law, or because they maintain what we call blacklisted database, gray listed. Those are suppliers who are a bit dubious. And whitelisted, these are suppliers who are in good standing. So PM must engage head of procurement that, look, I have these suppliers, I need these materials, and I need it in 3 months' time at the planning stage. And head of procurement will say, look, we will do due diligence and we will issue a tender. And the tender may take maybe up to 4 weeks. It can even be an international competitive bid, because they are preferred suppliers. They are suppliers who are not in good standing. All that must be done through due diligence. And due diligence, it's not the job of the PM to do due diligence, because what happens is the PM submits requirements to procurement, and procurement must sieve through. What happens is procurement might not even have the expertise. They will rely on PM to write terms of references, what we call RFP, request for proposal. You have request for proposal. You can have also request for quotation, or you can have expression of interest. You're trying to test the market. because the supply chain, they would tell you that we need to go to the market and make suppliers compete. But sometimes you find that if there are no suppliers, there is a single distributor, then you go for what we call single sourcing. Single sourcing means there could be a supplier who is assigned for sub-Sahara to provide this service. Sub-Sahara Africa is more or less like a distributor. And you cannot go to Europe because there's a distributor in Africa. You have to go to that supplier. And that makes single sourcing is where you motivate that the supplier is the only supplier in the region. Okay? If that supplier is not the single supplier in the region, then you need head of procurement who advise that we need to go to the market. What that means is we need to advertise. But however, the terms of references must come from the project manager. If the project manager has got suppliers in mind, which are not in conflict of interest, for example, if my wife has a company which supplies certain components which I need in my project, I cannot use that company because it's conflict of interest. And this is why you do declarations of interest. Your terms of references must be submitted to HOP, Head of Procurement. And now, as a project manager, you must engage Head of Procurement closely because he's a key stakeholder. And then you start what we call bid management. Look at this, bid management. It means that as a project manager, you let the head of procurement organize a conference for suppliers. As a project manager, you can chair that. You can even co-chair the meeting with the head of procurement. Because from procurement side, you are also a key stakeholder. From your side as a PM, you are also a key stakeholder because you understand terms of references more closely, technical, especially technical requirements. And this is why when the head of procurement receives tender responses to the tender, they will invite PM to be part of the evaluation committee. They make an evaluations committee and PM must make sure that PM is available. And PM may invite some specialists from the team, specialist engineers, to be part of the evaluation team. Now, the evaluation team, they will evaluate tenders from competing suppliers. And they've got now a formula, formulas they use, like maybe quality price or price quality based, that the quality must be very high, then the price must be competitive, which means that the lowest price might not necessarily get the tender because there is quality component involved. And this is coming to your question. This is very important in tendering process that if project manager selects suppliers, that can be seen as unethical and conflict of interest, and PM can be prosecuted in government procurement. But you can influence the decision because your PM is in charge of writing terms of references, right? You can influence the decision, but the award decision comes from head procurement. I don't know whether it makes sense, but this is exactly why they removed the process we used to have in project management, close procurement, because I don't think a project manager is mandated to close procurement. It's head of procurement. You can go with execution of the contract. PM is involved because you are interested in the project execution. So you will follow the contract execution between contractor and procurement, but you will not close the procurement. You will conduct procurements, you will be satisfied, and especially you can contribute to the issue of certificate of completion, but then let procurement close procurements, contracts.
Okay, Laban, thanks.
You're welcome. So this is the plan procurement management. It's so involved about the project procurement requirements, including experts, equipment, and services. So this will identify which project needs the best, which project needs can best be met, must be met from outside the organization. There are certain things which is not under your control, but again, from the project management point of view, if we procure anything, we must document a risk. Anything we can't do creates a risk because somebody else will do it for you. There's an inherent risk. Procurement processes generally refer to dealing with another organization, but can also be other areas from the project organization. You can also procure consultants. Why not? Consideration of potential sellers, particularly if buyer wishes to exert some control over the seller. There is a consideration of responsibility for obtaining and holding permits, professional licenses. This is a very important thing, professional licenses. What does this mean? It means, for example, to wire a house and certify a house that electricity is working properly configured, you need a license to do that. The one to make the wiring of electricity, you need a license. Even in other professions, you need a specific license. What that means is that the professional license is a mitigation that if a poor job is done, then somebody risks losing the license. Consideration of risks involved in procurement. This is very important because in procurement, we have two players. We have the seller. The seller is one who sells the services versus the buyer. Okay? Somebody who pays is always the buyer. Okay? So the buyer has got his own interest, the seller has got his own interest, and the seller hides, the seller risks, and the buyer risks. Because sometimes a quotation can be valid for 40 days. And within 40 days, you find that the money gets depreciated. And the seller, the provider, might not meet the buyer's expectations because things have changed. And this is why you have things like bid security. What they do is bid security is they get a percentage of your tender. If the tender is 5 million, they say 2% of 5 million will be bid security. What does bid security mean? Bid security means that that money will be frozen in the bank because the buyer doesn't want you to get the contract, then chicken out. You say, no, I got the award of the contract, but I can't execute it. Then the seller must be blacklisted and you will lose the bid security. So what they do is they get something like 2% of the tender amount. You put it in the bank, then they freeze it. If you move to site, you start doing the project, then they will release it. Because they've been situations where somebody is awarded a contract, then they fail to perform. If they fail to perform, what will happen is the customer will, you lose the 2%, because that's like a warranty. Because when you do a tender, a lot of people will apply, will respond, and for those who are awarded the tender, they must have a bid security that if you are awarded a tender, you are not going to change mind and refuse to do the work. If you do that, then you lose the 2%. And this is what we call bid security. This protects the buyer, not the provider. Bid security. Okay? So tendering is a big process because you get something like, if components, services are more than, for example, 50,000, then project manager must not buy that. It will be bought by procurement. Inputs. You need the business case. You need the benefits management plan, because this one goes during the project and post-project, when the benefits will be realized for the project. And then you get the plans, scope management plan, quality management plan, and resource management plan, including the scope baseline. Why do you need these plans? Because you need to know what activities will be outsourced. Especially in IT now, it's very common to outsource activities from India. Then we need to understand what part of the scope baseline is being outsourced. Okay? And then we get the project documents, including the milestones list, project team assignments, in terms of tasks and work packages. And then we can get the, we can get the milestone list, project team assignments, requirements documentation, requirements traceability matrix, resource requirements, risk register, and stakeholder register. Included also are the enterprise environmental factors like marketplace conditions, typical terms and conditions, unique local requirements, seller information, something like who are the directors of this company? Does this company got like BEE or preferred kind of status, black empowerment status? All those information must be obtained, as well as the pre-approved seller list. This could be for a whitelist from the database. And this is why you find a lot of corruption in procurement, because the project manager will insist that I need this supplier. The head of procurement says, but your supplier does not meet our requirements in terms of tax clearance, in terms of sometimes some requirements say you must be in business for the past 5 years. You cannot just like form a company 2 weeks ago and tender for a job. That would disqualify you because you are a startup and the policy means that you don't have experience to undertake the task at hand, and you will be disqualified. And if you get phone calls, like Tinashe was saying, sometimes you get political phone calls from the minister or from other people. Can you include this supplier on the list? But as a profession, you have also subscribed code of ethics, code of conduct. So you are conflicted. Because if you, for those of you, if you pay for PMI membership, you will be asked to subscribe to the code of conduct, ethical code of ethics by PMI. And that protects you as a profession to abide by best practice. You follow best practice. If you have undue pressure, then you should start applying for another job because you are in the wrong place. You must be professional and follow professional code of conduct. Okay? And then tools and techniques may be purchasing, expert judgment, purchasing judgment, legal requirements, market research. Then you have what we call make or buy analysis. Is it cheaper to make in-house or to buy? Normally, you will go to buy if you don't have expertise in the team and in the organization. And also, sometimes because of outsourcing, a lot of companies, they want to concentrate on their core business. So they will outsource something like IT, support. And this is why you find a lot of call centers in India and in South Africa. Call centers, they are supporting first line support to companies like in Europe, because for certain companies, they find it cheaper to outsource rather than to do it yourself. But that's a decision we need to make in the procurement management, whether to buy, and we call this make or buy. Make means your team can make it. If you don't have the expertise, then you must buy. You must go to the market. You must do a tender. Now, the thing is, the tenders may take 2 to 3 months, depending on how big the tender is. And if you don't plan tendering, then it might delay your project delivery. And as a project manager, if your project is delayed, then that's a negative in terms of your ambitions, because every project manager wants to be a senior project manager at some point, and you need to be at some point you need to be like director of projects. How do you get promoted? By making good decisions and saving money for the company. Requirements for legal contracts and offer, acceptance of offer, consideration, legal capacity, legal purpose. You cannot have a legal enforcement contract for the sale of illegal goods or services. And in South Africa, the physical address of both parties is required. I think in most countries, even in Namibia, you need to have a physical address. Different types of different situations. Types of contracts. affects risk for buyer and seller. This is very important because most projects, the buyer will tell you that we are on fixed price, because we know fixed price contracts, it always favors the buyer, because whatever happens, once you sign the contract, you must deliver it. Otherwise, you can be sued. Then you can get categories like fixed price or lump sum contracts. But this, again, most of them, they will be money paid, but according to milestones. Like if contract is 5 million, then if you do the first phase, you are paid like 1 million. So payment are tied to milestones. And the fixed price contract always favors, I think this one you must annotate it somewhere. You must write it somewhere. Fixed price always favors the buyer. Because if we do a contract now with fixed price of 20,000 and delivery is next year, October, this date, 20,000 rands of now will be more stronger than next year because of depreciation. Then you can have cost reimbursable contracts, CR. These are contracts where I buy my own air ticket, I book my hotel, and I give you receipts, and you refund me. This is what we call the reimbursables. Travel, hotel for accommodation, and you can also claim per diems. This is why you find experts always keeping receipts. If you go by Uber, by taxi, you always ask for the receipt because you need to be reimbursed. You need to put them on some paper with print all the receipts you incurred in the contract. Then the buyer refunds you. The same with the time and material. It means, for example, you don't know how much materials, if you've got somebody tiling your building, you would say, for so many tiles, we'll pay so much, because you can't predict ahead. This is called time and material, hybrid of above. You can also have fixed price or lump sum price contracts, FP, fixed price. This is what we say. This is the most popular type of contracts is FP. This one favors whoever is the buyer. The one who is paying money is favored by the fixed contract, the buyer. So in the project, it depends on on which side you are. Are you on the buyer side or are you on the supplier side? Fixed total price for well-defined products. Yeah, that can include incentives. Like, for example, the project is 8 months, but if you deliver on 6 months, then you're going to get a bonus. Changes can be specified, but usually incur additional costs. And simplest form of a purchase order, yeah, is a purchase order. And some further contract types, you can get fixed price or lump sum contracts. Type of fixed price contracts, you get firm fixed price incentive fee, fixed price with economic price adjustment, which is sometimes, if you are using the fixed price with economic price adjustment, it means that if a project is 8 months project, then in the 7th and 8th month, you may issue another invoice to adjust, because things have changed. The currency has depreciated. So it depends on what receipts you've got. Then the other one is the FP, the fixed price with economic price adjustment, this one. This one takes into consideration things like inflation, in Africa. The only problem, like in Zambia, is you can't quote in dollars. I think even in South Africa, I mean, you cannot operate in South Africa where there is rands, then you do your quotation in dollars. It's not allowed. The same in Zambia, it's not allowed. I think in Namibia as well. Huh? Can you quote in British pounds, for example?
No, definitely not.
So if you have a 2 years project and you're not sure about what will happen, because the buyer is always protected. They will tell you you must quote in Namibian dollars. But if you think next year, this time, there might be fluctuations in currencies and inflation. So what the seller will do is they will put the risks in the price. The price will be inflated to cover for eventualities. This is common with this type of cost price. Sorry, this is the fixed price with economic price adjustments. This is fixed price with incentive fee. It gives the buyer and seller some flexibility. For example, that this is a 6 months project, but if you deliver it in 4 months, then there will be this bonus. So there's an incentive to deliver faster the value as opposed to FFP. This in the exam, you get the questions, which one is more favorable? Like which one is more, because always remember that there are 2 players in contracts. There is the buyer. The buyer is the one who pays for the services versus the seller. The seller now becomes like the provider. Okay. So the type of contracts, there are contracts like fixed price. They always favor the buyer. Because whatever happens, you will be paid the same amount and you must deliver. Once you have appended that signature, your signature, you must deliver. Cost reimbursable contracts. These are contracts where we're not sure about the final cost. So let the seller spend, then you take the receipts, which will be refunded. You can fly, keep up in the hotel, just keep the receipts. On the types of contracts with cost plus fixed fee, this is cost plus the fixed fee, this one. This is cost plus incentive fee. The buyer pays all costs and an agreed fee plus bonus for beating performance objectives. So air tickets, hotel accommodation will be done by the buyer. And then there will be an incentive. If you finish within 2 weeks, then we pay more. Cost plus award fee. This is another type of contract where the buyer pays all costs and accommodation and apportionment, of a bonus based on performance. The next one is the cost plus fee, cost plus percentage of costs. Buyer pays all costs and a percentage of costs as a fee. This is not allowed for US federal acquisitions. And then time and material, T&M, usually used for small dollar amounts priced on a like per hour basis. This is popular for tilers. If you tile in your house, you're putting tiles, then you can maybe charge per square meter or per hour. So normally you have to, if it's trying to tile the sitting room, you will go with a tiler and measure the square meters. Then you pay per square meter, or you pay per hourly basis. As elements of cost reimbursable, it means that you could tell the tiler that you buy cement, you buy the tiles, then you can reimburse when once they provide the receipts. Then you have cost plus fee, or cost plus percentage of costs. Buyer pays all costs and the percentage of costs as a fee. This is also not allowed in the US. Time and the material used for small dollar amounts, price per hour, like we mentioned, as elements of fixed price, as elements of cost reimbursables. Whatever is a reimbursables is like you incur first, taxi, through Uber, hotel accommodation, then you keep receipts and you're reimbursed. Advantages and disadvantages. You can refer to the RITA PMP page 515. And risks, buyer risk highest and seller risk lowest. For cost plus percentage of cost, buyer risk lowest and the seller risk highest. So when you're a project manager, normally you must know where you belong. Do you belong to the buyer's side or you belong to the seller's side? Because in every contract transaction, there is a buyer and a seller. And then you have to identify which risks are you going to mitigate depending on which side you belong. So some definitions like price, profit, cost, target price, sharing ratio. Or big mega projects where you can share the profits, you even share the losses. Selling price, point of total assumption. The outputs, we have the procurement management plan, the procurement strategy. This looks like we're gonna buy or make or buy, bid documents, request for proposal, invitation for bid, request for quotation, should also contain information for sellers, like standard contract, format required for responses, terms and conditions, and special provisions, depending if it's a full RFP or IFB or RFQ. The outputs, we expect a procurement statement of work, which can consist of project scope, developed from the project scope statement and WBS and the dictionary. Must be in sufficient detail for sellers to determine what is required. Level of detail required depends on situation. So you can't put generic situation. Can include specifications, quantities, quality levels, performance data, period of performance, location, and other requirements. Even some KPIs required in the project. And then you can have source selection criteria, can be objective or subjective. This is what we were talking about, that sometimes you can do single sourcing. If you single source, then you must justify why you are single sourcing. Sometimes some suppliers are the sole distributor, for example, for Southern Africa. So consider the price, understanding of need, technical capability, risk management approach, technical approach, warranty, financial capacity. You make some make or buy decisions. Independent cost estimates and change requests. And you can update project documents like lessons, requirements documentations, RTM, risk register, and stakeholder registers. Also, you can update organizational process assets updates. Then the next one is conduct procurements. Once we've planned, then you will see the outputs of the previous process appearing as inputs to the conduct procurements. These are the inputs. We have a project management plan, the subsidiaries plan, smaller plan, like the scope management plan. We need that. We also need the requirements management plan, communication management plan, risk management plan, how to identify, assess, respond, and implement responses. A procurement management plan, configuration management plan, and cost baseline. This one was just in the next previous process. We had the procurement management plan. And the project documents, you need the lessons, the schedule, requirements documentation, risk register, and stakeholder register. All these documents are required as inputs, including procurement documents like requests for proposals, seller proposals, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. The tools and techniques available is expert judgment, advertising to attract additional sellers. Why? Because from procurement point of view, the more sellers you've got, then the more likely the price to go down. Though it depends, because I've seen, like in my practice, sometimes it doesn't mean that if you are lowest price, you get the contract. Then you must organize what we call bidder conferences. Bid conference is a meeting where you invite all suppliers to come for more clarifications about the tender. And sometimes it's mandatory to attend the bid conference. If it is your project and you organize a bid conference, then make sure that you chair that meeting, or you can co-chair with the head of procurement. Okay. And then we can have proposal evaluation techniques, negotiations through interpersonal skills. And you have selected sellers. Major typical components will be statement of work, schedule, baseline, performance reporting, period of performance, roles and responsibilities, place of performance, pricing, etc., and change requests. And what will be on the output side continued, you will have some updates in the plan, quality management plan, the communication management plan, risk management plan, procurement management plan, and the baselines in terms of scope, schedule, and cost. You will also update lessons, requirements documentation, requirements traceability matrix, resource calendars, risk register, and stakeholder register, including organizational process assets. So I think the best is to have all this in Excel, Microsoft Excel. And before you go home, you update these documents. So they're all in shape. Last but not least, the control procurement process, which is the process of managing procurement relationships, monitoring contract performance. This is what I was talking about, that if it's the contract is part of your project, then you need to monitor contract performance. Remember, contractors at some point, they will even require a reference letter from you. So you have to monitor that the contract is being performed accordingly, because some contractors are dubious. They will put different CVs, and then when it comes to execution, they will use other people. So you must monitor that those people who are in the contract are the people who are executing the jobs. Okay? You making changes and corrections as appropriate and closing out contracts. Inputs, you need the project management plan. The components of the project management plan would include the requirements in terms of requirements management plan, risk management plan, procurement management plan, change management plan, and the schedule baseline. Project documents required include the assumptions log, lessons, sorry, milestone list, quality record reports, requirements documentation, requirements traceability matrix, risk register, and stakeholder register. Agreements like MOUs, letters of intent, consortia. Consortia means that two companies come together because one company doesn't have enough skills. So they can combine 2 or 3 companies and form what we call a consortium. Consortium is a combination of 1 or 2 companies who bring together the skill set. And those could be part of the agreements, procurement documents, approved change requests, work performance data, enterprise environmental factors, something like contract change control system, which we call variations. When you change the contract, it needs to go for further approval again. Marketplace conditions, financial management and accounts payable system, buying organizations code of ethics. You see, so this is very important to remove what we call conflict of interest. So there must be a code of ethics. Okay. Buying organizational code of ethics. But for example, if you are in the bid committee, then you cannot use your brother's company or your wife's company or your husband's company. Then the code of ethics is contravened. Tools and techniques, expert judgment, claims administration. This is when you have suppliers claiming, for example, overtime claims and stuff. And data analysis, performance reviews, structured review of sellers' progress, identify success, failures, and non-compliance. End value analysis in terms of execution of the contract, trend analysis, inspections, and audits. Outputs could be things like closed procurements. It means that the contract has been executed up to closure. Then we have work performance information, procurement documentation, updates, change requests. There will always be change requests. Anyway, it will be strange if you have a project end to end without change requests. That would be strange because projects are executed in an environment where things are changing. And then you can upgrade this, update the project management plan through the risk management plan, procurement management plan, because things are changing. So we need all the updates to the schedule baseline and the cost baseline, including lessons, resource requirements, requirements traceability matrix, risk register, and stakeholder register. All these are subject to updates, as well as the organizational process assets, which can include payment schedules, requests, seller performance evaluation, pre-qualified seller list updates, lessons learned, repository, and procurement file. These are all falling under what we call organizational process assets. That ends the procurement component module. You have to do the first 10 practice questions at the end of this chapter and complete the quiz, which is in the delegate workbook, chapter 9. To solidify and cement your understanding of this knowledge area, procurement knowledge area. You see in summary that there are types of contracts you can venture in, and each contract has got advantages and disadvantages, and it depends. If you are in a project, it depends on which side you are, if you are on the buyer's side or you are on the seller's side, and then what risks you are exposed to depends on which side you are in. Okay, this is the last but not least. Maybe we can take a quick break, 10 minutes break. Then we can do the stakeholder, the last knowledge area. Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the last knowledge area, the project stakeholder management. If you look on the PMBOK, what we have is page 25. This is the knowledge area, which has 1, 2, 3, 4 processes. From identify stakeholders, this one is done in the initiating process group, then plan stakeholder engagement. You saw this, most of the processes as an input, the plan stakeholder engagement. Then you have manage stakeholder engagement, which is happening in the execution process group. And the last one, the monitor stakeholder engagement. Some definitions. So some definitions. Project stakeholder management includes the processes required to identify the people, groups, or organizations that could impact or be impacted by the project, to analyze stakeholder expectations and their impact on the project, and to develop appropriate management strategies for effectively managing, engaging stakeholders in project decisions and executions. So who is a stakeholder? A stakeholder is an individual, group, or organization that may affect or be affected by or perceive itself to be affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of a project, program, or portfolio. Because it goes, a project may belong to a program, which may belong to a portfolio. So in organizations, competitors are also part of stakeholders. Even you, the project manager, you're a stakeholder of a project. Sponsor is a stakeholder. So we have different types of stakeholders. As long as you perceive yourself or perceived to be affected or impacted by any decision of the project. Someone actively involved in the project, or those interests whose interests may be positively impacted by the project. So this is just examples of stakeholders: sponsor, customers, portfolio managers, project management office, project manager himself or herself is a stakeholder. Project team, functional managers, because we need resources to negotiate for resources from functional managers, operations managers, business partners. The list can be more than this because you can include stakeholders like competitors. Your competitors are key stakeholders in your project. Government regulations, municipality regulations, because we work within municipalities. If where your office is, you must pay for rates for water and electricity. So the municipality is a stakeholder. The process in stakeholder management like identify stakeholders, plan stakeholder engagement, manage stakeholder engagement, and monitor stakeholder engagement. So we've got only 4 processes in plan stakeholder knowledge area. The first process, identify stakeholders. This is a process of identifying project stakeholders regularly and analyzing and documenting relevant information regarding their interests in the project, their involvement in the project, interdependencies, their influence in the project, and the potential impact on project success. And always know that the first process, this one is in the initiating process group, okay? And we need the charter, project charter. These are inputs. We need the business case. We need the benefits management plan. This is a plan which profiles the benefits which will be accrued from the project, like during projects and post-project. Then you have communication management plan, stakeholder engagement plan, change log, issue log, and requirements documentation, including any agreements, relevant agreements. And the end result is this stakeholder register. But the tools and techniques, expert judgment, data gathering, like questionnaires, sample surveys, brainstorming, in order to agree, come up with potential stakeholders and stakeholder mappings, representations, meetings. These are the tools and techniques we can use to help identify stakeholders. The stakeholder analysis is a technique of systematically gathering and analyzing quantitative and qualitative information to determine whose interests should be taken into account throughout the project. So this one is a step-by-step kind of process. So in step 1, we identify all potential stakeholders and relevant information. Step 2, identify potential impact and support from each stakeholder. And classification models include the power interest grid, power influence grid, influence impact grid, salience model in terms of power, agency, and legitimacy. I'm not sure whether you are familiar with these grids. Are you?
No.
No.
Okay. So this one, you plot graphs like power, for example, power. You put a quadrant, 4 quadrants, like this. This is A, B, C, D. So if you go with power, this side, maybe you can go with interest, this guy. So all the stakeholders in this quadrant, they have less interest and less power. So we can do, for example, all the stakeholders here, you list them. Because this, going this side, it's interest, okay, in your project. Going up here is power in your project. So these people here, you see that they have high power and high interest in your project. These are the people we call killers of your project, in inverted commas. They're not murderers, but killers, because they can kill your project. Because they are very powerful. You see the power on this side, and they have high interest in your project, which means that you must recognize all organization, people, groups, societies who fall in this. Means they must be well managed. People who are here, they have high interest but less power, because the power is this side, the interest is very high in your project. They want to know what's happening in your project, but they have no power to stop your project, right? So this must be kept satisfied, and these ones must be kept satisfied and happy all the time. These people must be very happy all the time, and this must be kept satisfied and managed. These people here, they have low interest and low power, but they just want to know what's going on in your project. Okay? This can be managed. And these people here, they are very powerful, but less interest. They don't care what you do, but they are very powerful. For example, government could be municipality. They're very powerful because they can issue penalties if they don't agree with what you are doing. They can even grab your land or plot, but they are not interested in what you do. They're just powerful. This must be kept informed of what's going on, okay, and managed. So you can use this type of grid to analyze your stakeholders. For example, you can use power interest, power influence. It means on this side, you get the influencer. What's the amount of influence these stakeholders can have? This is low influence, high influence. Influence of that, of what? Stopping your project. So you can analyze the influence. These are called sometimes Gardner grids. These are grids we use in order to determine, for example, unions. In which quadrant will be the unions? They could be here, because unions are perceived to be very powerful, because they can withdraw your labor. And maybe they can be here if the unions are not interested in your project, but they are very powerful. They can sit here. But if they are interested in your project and very powerful, you can push them here. So this is dependent on projects to projects. There is no like one size fits all. You need to do an analysis using these grids in terms of classification. Where do you place specific stakeholders? And this allows you to plan communication. For example, killer ones. These are stakeholders who can stop they are capable of stopping your project. So you must devise effective communication channel with them, right? Because you don't want your project to be stopped prematurely. So this is what the grids do to you. I think they are very powerful in stakeholder analysis, because the grids, they will inform the communication plan of various stakeholders depending on how powerful and less powerful and how much interest they have got in your project, or how less the interest it is in your project. So once you assess how stakeholders are likely to react and plan how to influence them to enhance their support, because you need what we call friends of the project, especially community projects. You need to get all community leaders supporting your project, but it depends on where you push them. In this category, it means they've got high interest, like headmen, the chiefs. If you're doing community projects, they've got high interest, but they cannot stop your problem because the power is quite low here. So you need to get to manage them and make them happy all the time. Okay, this will be happy stakeholders. So they cannot stop your project, but they're happy with what you're doing. But this must be kept satisfied. In this quadrant, all stakeholders in this quadrant must be kept satisfied all the time. And then you've got chances of, chances of delivering a successful project. And these are the models we're talking about. Okay, you can plot power. Power means that authority. For example, they can write a memo like this project must be stopped because they are very powerful. This side, the power is very high and the interest is very high. So they must be managed what? Closely. You must use your soft skills, your collective experience to manage them closely. If there's a query, you must make sure you respond immediately, because these are part of the high. These are what we call, in quotation marks, killers. Killers of what? Your project. They'll kill you. They'll kill your project. And if your project is killed, it means you have no job as a project manager. Okay? So everybody who belongs here, you must manage closely. Everybody who belongs in a high law, you must keep them satisfied, because they are powerful, but their interest is very low. This could be like a municipality, because if in municipality, you need to get approvals from municipality. For example, if you are building double story, they must approve, but they really don't care what you do. Their interest is very low, but they are very powerful. These ones here, the power is very low and the interest is very low. This could be neighbors, peripheral stakeholders. They are really, their interest is very low and the power is very low, but they just can be monitored and keep in the loop. Okay? Here, their interest is very high, but they have no power to stop your project. This could be customers, and you will need to identify all stakeholders. You need to identify where they are falling, either here, there, here, or there. Why? Because you need to, like, this must be kept informed. You make sure that you include these stakeholders in your communication plan about maybe newsletters, weekly updates. Their interest is very high, though they cannot stop your project. So these are the what we call Gardner grids. For you to come up with a communication plan, you need to do this analysis, the stakeholder analysis. Because look, manage closely. These guys here, at least you can have weekly, even daily updates. so that they always keep informed of what's going on. And should there be any query, you respond immediately because they are very key in your project. Okay. So when you do stakeholder analysis, you can also determine stakeholder management like salient model. For example, you want to decide who is number 7, definitive, number 5, dangerous, because they have something, they are powerful and they command agency. 3, demanding. 4, dominant. They have power and they have legitimacy. 5 is dangerous. 6, dependent, legitimacy and agency. 7, definitive. And 8, what is 8? Non-stakeholder. It's not about you. It's not about, it's the way it is that they have nothing to do with your project, then they're non-stakeholder. Do you do this in your projects? Because in truth, to tell you, I find this very helpful in my projects. When I can sit down and analyze my stakeholders and then devise a communication plan, and I know whom to pay more attention to and what matters to the project. What do you think?
It is helpful. I deal with academicians on research projects.
Yes.
So I really need to know who is falling under what.
I see.
Some are really demanding. They want each day to know how far the project is going. What are the findings in the research? Early findings. So those I would put them on the high and make sure each day I have a notification popping up on the laptop to say send the report to this person.
And do you think, because if these people here are mismanaged, do you think there's a risk to stop your project?
Yes, they are the principal investigators. So if I mismanage them, definitely I might lose my job.
So you're right. I agree with you 100%. I can't agree anymore. So these need to be managed closely and you develop relationships with them. So they kept always happy. And you base your communication plan based on stakeholder analysis. Because you cannot do your communication plan without this analysis. Because the frequency of communication, the channel of communication depends on where the stakeholder sits. Manage closely means that depending on the project, you may be speaking even every day and sending highlight reports. These people here in the power, they have a lot of power. The power is very high, but their interest is very small. So you can just keep them satisfied. These ones here, it's low. You keep monitoring them, and these ones you keep them informed of what's going on because their interest is very high. Very good. So the outputs you expect is the stakeholder register, change requests, project management updatation in terms of requirements, management plan, communication management plan, risk management plan, stakeholder management plan must be updated depending on what is going on. And the assumption log, maybe I should say, may be updated because it depends on what has happened. Issue log and risk register. The next one is the plan stakeholder engagement. This is the process we will do in the planning. The process of developing approaches to involve stakeholders based on their needs, expectations, interests, and potential impact on the project. So we need to plan the engagement, and the inputs will be the project charter, resource management plan, communication management plan, risk management plan, and the project documents in case you need to update. So these project documents will be also through the input, and they will be in the output as updates. Tools and techniques. Expert judgment refers to your collective intuition based on your experience and the way you talk to people. You will choose one or two of these tools and techniques. And this is why what we say in PMBOK, that PMBOK is not a methodology. It just gives you a lot of tools and techniques. It's up to you to choose what is working, which one to engage and not to. You can use, for example, mind mapping, stakeholder engagement assessment matrix. What is this? This is where you map the stakeholders. You can do a table where you have stakeholders in the rows, and in the columns you put engagement methods, and then you can be ticking what is working, what is not working. And then you can do an assessment of engagement levels, a review, and depending on the influence, stakeholder influence on your project, you can have expectations how much to engage more of stakeholders. This is why I get surprised, but I think it's a story for another day. I get surprised when I see that there is a project and you see communities protesting against the project. This is prevalent, especially in Southern Africa, when we want to do railway lines, when you want to put electricity pylons, you have to disperse communities, and you find that communities are protesting. It's the levels of engagement. I always blame project managers, because communities, if you want to pass a highway or a railway line, communities become very key in that project, in those projects. I have a colleague. His project has been approved, chartered, but he can't execute for 3 years because the communities don't allow him. I was talking to him that, no, you must engage the community. The community must be friends of the project. You must get the ownership, sense of ownership from the community, because they're very key. It's not just that you put leaflets or you announce that we are going to do this project, because the community don't see any benefits. The community leaders have not been engaged from the onset, from inception of the project. So you find that a lot of projects have been shelved. They are stopped because communities can protest. If you force your way, they will steal all your components and you have nothing to deliver, because the stakeholders have not been engaged. I don't know what is your take, but it's just enough to switch on radio. You will hear that community protests and on news that the project has been sabotaged. But the thing we ask ourselves as project managers, has there been enough stakeholder engagement in this project to win what we call hearts and minds of the community and the stakeholders? Everybody must be supportive of your project. I don't know, what is your take?
Yes, I think that's very important, because communities, they are working together with, for example, traditional leaders and so forth. So if you as a project manager, you must actually make sure that you sensitize the traditional authorities and traditional leaders, and then they can then sensitize the community. So if you do it the other way around, then you will face a huge problem.
I agree with you. And if a project manager says, no, we have not budgeted for workshops, for example, for chiefs, headmen, community-led leaders, and when you start executing the project, you get resistance, and then that's when you involve them. I think that's too late, too good, too late. Because the community leaders, headmen, chiefs must be involved during the planning as key stakeholders. When you do workshops, scoping workshops, they must be involved from the onset during the planning stage. And the most important thing is to sell the benefits of the project. If you see how much it's pathetic if you see, the pylons for electricity. The communities are vandalizing that. That's lack of sense of ownership. It's because the projects for pylons have not been sold to communities. That if they know that, if we have pylons, then this gives us electricity, we can have barber shops, we can have spaza shops, we can have this type of benefits. You will find that communities will even protect the infrastructure because you've won hearts and minds of the communities in that project. But mostly projects are failing because of vandalism and pilferage. I was talking to one of my colleagues. He was saying when he closed the project, he has nothing to deliver because everything was stolen. So I was wondering what kind of project management is that? Because there was definitely no risk management. There was no stakeholder analysis and management of stakeholders to ensure that, of course, if there is high crime area, then you have to rely on insurance. You can't say I closed the project because there was nothing to deliver. Everything was stolen. So I think this is very important. This is really very important. And because sometimes, like I was mentioning, especially IT projects, when users know that when this project comes live, then there will be no corruption. We will not benefit from corruption. So they will try to make it fair. And as a project manager, you must pick those things up and mitigate them because you will get resistance. You need to get stakeholders to be supportive. So you you need to do some review. This is engagement level. It's very nice. Maybe we go there, 521 in the PMBOK. It's something I think you should be thinking about. 521. This is the one. You see, it's a matrix assessment level where you have a list of stakeholders: unaware, resistant, neutral, supportive, and leading. So if you can do an assessment like this, you can mitigate that in terms of, remember, a project is successful if stakeholders are happy. Key stakeholders are happy. Then you are doing good. Okay. So here C represents the current engagement level, and D indicates the level that the project team has assessed as essential to ensure project success. I know of projects where it costed millions of dollars to automate end-to-end procurement, but they slide back, they go back to paper, manual work. They say this system is not user-friendly. They will do everything to despise the system, because you, as a project manager, you did not win their hearts and minds to support the system. They are not supportive. So whatever happens, they will be negative towards your project. And eventually, your project will fail. And you can get demoralized as a project manager. Okay? So I think it pays to know about this, because as a project manager, you will know whether the engagement levels are very low, and you need to mitigate that. You need to mitigate that and motivate the teams and make sure it works. Outputs, you have an engagement plan. An example is on page 522 on the PMBOK. How does an engagement plan looks like? This one. Okay. Stakeholder engagement plan. It can be daunting, you see that, to be a project manager. When the project fails, you'd want not to mention it in your life, because it will really demoralize you. So the next process is manage stakeholder engagement. That's now the process of communicating and working with stakeholders to meet their needs and expectations, address issues, and also promote and foster appropriate stakeholder engagement. You've got the inputs: communication management plan, risk management plan, stakeholder engagement plan, change management plan. And then you can accompany that with project documents, the logs, lessons register, and stakeholder register, with EEF and organizational process assets. Tools and techniques: expert judgment, communication skills, feedback, rely on feedback. This is very key, because feedback can allow you to know whether the engagement is working or not. For your interpersonal skills, you have conflict management, how to deal with difficult stakeholders. You really need to be a people person. Cultural awareness, negotiation skills, persuasion skills, observation, conversation, political awareness. We talked about this. Political awareness, what is happening, and sometimes you have political pressure in what is happening. You need to strategize how to get things done your way. Set up some ground rules and meetings. Outputs: approved change requests, communication management plan updates, stakeholder engagement plan. Because especially the stakeholder engagement plan is not cast in concrete, because sometimes you have a change of stakeholders. Even stakeholders, you get difficult ones, those who change mind every week. This week they say, forget about what I said. Now let's do this. But you said this. No, forget about that. We want this now. The following week, forget about what we did. We want this now. Those can be difficult, and you need to strategize how to manage those type of stakeholders. And then you do updates to the project documentation. The next process is the monitor stakeholder engagement. This is the process of monitoring project stakeholder relationships and tailoring strategies for engaging stakeholders through notification. You see, in most project management jobs, when they advertise, they will say ability to create relationships, if you've seen, and networking through key stakeholders. Because if you have key stakeholders like a minister, for example, minister, permanent secretary, these are very high positions and they are very busy and they are very key. So you need, as a project manager, if you're delivering a government project, you need to find a way to create a relationship which works for your project. And don't expect to create a relationship with you. No, it's the PM who should create a relationship, strategic relationship. So you get issues resolved immediately. I've dealt with some ministers or PS who tell, oh, no, don't worry, you can WhatsApp me, you see. Because every time they're in meetings and you need issues to be resolved, and if you go through the secretary tells you that is in the, do you have an appointment? The filters, the gatekeepers, they will not let you see the minister or the permanent secretary because you don't have an appointment. But you've got an issue to be resolved. So you need to create relationships to unblock the barriers to key stakeholders. So you can have access to the key stakeholders and get things done. At the end of the day, they will praise you as a project manager that you got the project on time, in full, and on budget, and you protect the quality. So the inputs are the resource management plan, communication management plan, stakeholder engagement plan. These are the key plans you need. And the project documents you need are the logs, the registers, in terms of stakeholder register, risk register, lessons learned register, and issue log is also called a register. It's just a terminology issue. In some institutions, this is called also a register. Okay. Work performance data, enterprise environmental factors, organizational process assets. The tools and techniques, you will have to look at the data analysis. You see, this tool is almost everywhere. Alternative analysis, root cause analysis, like the fishbone technique. Stakeholder analysis, this is where we do what? The grid, okay? The 4 grids. Power influence or power interest grids. Decision making, multi-criteria decision analysis, voting, stakeholder engagement, assessment matrix, communication skills, look at feedback loops, presentations, and also assess your interpersonal and team skills in terms of active listening, cultural awareness, leadership, networking, political awareness. Political and cultural awareness goes through, most likely go side by side, as well as meetings. Outputs, You have work performance information, change requests, project management plan updates, updatations could be required in these subsidiary plans as well as the project documents. You see these are appearing also in the input as well as output. When they appear on the output side, these are updates. So it's very easy to follow through because you agree that updates should happen because something has happened. And that ends the monitor engagement as the last process. You will have to do the first 10 practice questions at the end of chapter 13 in RETA exam prep. And always don't forget the shuffle game against the process groups, the activities involved. This one will be it's a professional and social responsibility. This one is more or less like more on ethics. But I would want you to maybe when you apply for PMI membership, you must download the ethics code of conduct. There are pillars in their ethics. This you must read on your own because on ethics is very important. I'm not undermining ethics. PMI code of ethics and professional conduct, as many exam questions relate directly to the code. They do examine it, the code of conduct, because they don't want a project manager to be corrupt. They want you to know when there's conflict of interest. They want you to know that you cannot project manage a client's project, then you resign in the middle of the project. That's not ethical. So you must go to this website and download the code of ethics. Read it. As a professional, you need to subscribe to the code of ethics, code of conduct for respect, honest, integrity, and fairness. These are the categories you have: responsibility, respect, fairness, and honest in your conduct. You must subscribe to PMI code of conduct and you become a professional member. This is why when you put in your CV that you are a professional member of the PMI, it means you subscribe to their code of conduct, code of ethics. And normally employers pay. You can ask your employer to pay for you because it's a professional body and the benefits are huge. It means if you're a member, you are ethically aware of the ethics involved in the PMI, professional and social responsibility. Okay, so I would just urge you to download that and read it because you take ownership of decisions, make decisions based on the best practice, only accept assignments that you are qualified to complete. I've seen people put PMI, put all these things when they are not qualified. That's not ethical. Protect proprietary information, report unethical behavior and violations. This respect to ourselves, others, and resources. Maintain an attitude of mutual cooperation. Respect cultural differences. Because if you work in a project where it's multicultural, you have to respect that we are different but unity in purpose. Engage in good faith negotiations. Be direct in dealing with conflict. Do not use your power or position to influence others for your benefits. As you get certified, you have to always be aware of your social responsibility and fairness and act impartially without bribery. Continuously look for conflicts of interest and disclose them. This is Very important, because if there is a conflict of interest, for example, the supplier is your friend, you must declare that. Do not discriminate against others. Do not use your position for personal or business gain. These are the pillars of ethics for PMI. Honesty, try to understand the truth, be truthful in all communications, and create an environment where others tell the truth. This is not just for your information, because there are some questions in the exam about ethics. So you must know honesty, responsibility, respectful, fairness. Okay? And the exercise, you read the PMI Code of Ethics. You can download it if you want from the PMI website of professional conduct, and read PMism related to professional and social responsibilities, according to Rita on page 598. And read explanations of categories in those indicated pages. You can do an exercise. If you want to have a feel of how ethical questions come, you can, on page 599 of the Rita exam prep, you can do the first 10 practice questions at the end of chapter 14 in the Rita PMP exam prep book. And study plans, we talked a bit about study plans, and these are the links to internet self-assessment tests. Again, you need an exam mentor. I'll be your mentor for the exam, okay? Learning style, you must know how you learn best, through discussions or through individual study focus. Study method, time available, tips to share. And for study plans, refer to the delegate notes, page 17 and 18. And I would recommend this class we had just now should be your study group. So you can even put some questions on the WhatsApp. Well, guys, what do you think is the answer to this? Then there's some discussions. Approach on exam day, wear your PMI hat, because you will receive a badge, I think, when you do membership. Snacks, breaks, mark for review, answer all, and find easy questions first. This is the approach, because it's multiple choice. What some people do is, yes, you go first round, you answer all the easy questions, then you go again next round, you go for moderate questions, then final round you go for difficult questions, then you pass the exam. And let us know to celebrate when you pass the exam. And that ends the theory of the CAPM. Any questions? Oh, Tinashe is not with us. Okay. You are free to ask me any questions. Otherwise, we can end the session, and then as we agreed, next week is your week to recap all the theory, be in good standing with the theory. Then after next week, we can have a session for revision. That's direct questions. You can ask me, there is this question, what is wrong? I know the answer, but it doesn't make sense. Then we discuss it. Or I can't, because the answers are there in the question. Or I can't find the answer. Or my answer is different from the answers they have. Such type of questions. I will welcome those questions. But then I need you first to get your theory under your belt. and then we can do revisions and you revise. I think if you keep focused, by end of the month you can sit for the exam. Any remarks, comments, questions?
Yeah, well, no, I would like to just maybe thank you for this journey. It has been short, but it has also been long. Um, from my end, I think my head is spinning, and with a little bit of with a little bit of fear to face these questions. But I do have hope. I do have. I'm determined actually. So, and I've really learned a lot in terms of informations that I totally missed, and I'm sure I will get stuck. That's for sure. But I think the sessions of questions will then really prepare me to decide. But as your advice, I wouldn't want to keep it longer.
No,
Uh,
not at all.
yes.
You have to go for it now. When you're fresh, you have to sit down and recollect, pack everything, and then start attempting questions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
From my side, as well, I would just firstly like to say thank you very much for your time. It has been a challenge for me. I'm glad I embarked on this, but I was quite frustrated at trying to work and still report to this training. But I'm glad I took a chance and I've managed to find space or a gap just to sit in and listen. But you're not going to be hearing from me anytime soon. I want to go take leave and really study. It's a very interesting. It keeps a person wanting to know more. It's an interesting I don't know, training session. It's short, but yes, like the lady said, it's very long because there's a lot of things to take in. The time is short though, but it's the things we deal with, and we have always swept everything. For me anyway, we sweep things under the carpet because we don't think they will stand out. But I'm slowly realizing that it's what forms a good project. People that are successful are really grounded in such, and we think it's favor or maybe because they've got right context. No, the foundation